Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 93 of The Rewind, our podcast dedicated to Pantheon, news, and community content. I hope you're ready, because this week we're diving straight into the recent HDRP Part 2 livestream. Finding some fear and boss mechanics, we're seeking some giant lore, and giving our usual Pantheon Plus updates. So, grab your coat and galoshes, and maybe a torch. Get ready to be immersed as me, Desrin, and my weathered co-host, Theric, take you out into the elements. We hope you enjoy this week's Rewind. Okay, Theric, I'm not going to lie. I tried to kill the hype last week, but I don't think it worked, man.
Failed miserably.
Yeah, I'm not even mad. In fact, I'm kind of anxious to get started. Like I jokingly said earlier, like we might want to consider a kind of oops all dev stream rewind.
Mm-hmm.
But and don't worry, guys. Like we're gonna have a little more than that. But that's just like that's what's on my mind. So I guess that's my.
You're not wrong. I was writing out the notes and I'm like, we could just do the whole show on this. There's so much to dig into. And even having talked about it just a couple days ago now, like I feel like there was so much, even at the end of the Pantheon Plus U, I was like, there's so much more to talk about here. But yeah, man,
cram packed.
Yeah, it's on my mind too. So, and I know we're both on a time crunch a little bit trying to get ready here. So I think we've got a big show and I'm excited to get to it.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you know what else is on my mind, Theric?
What's that?
It's our freaking awesome adventuring party.
They're always on our minds.
That's true. It's true. They're always on our mind and in our hearts. But this week, we've got Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Ziplocs on the Dark Mirror Rogue, Jason on the Scar Beard Lord, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scarbard, WikiWoo on the Human Enchanter, Daimlos on the Dark Myr Cleric, Zerg Jerk on the Dwarf Rogue, BitCrunch on the Ashen Elf, Schmunk, Man of Rohan on the Ember Elf Ranger, Benjamin Caldwell on the Dark Myr Enchanter. Wow, you guys are awesome.
Benjamin Caldwell, new member to the adventuring party. He donated last week and joined up. So awesome to have you, Benjamin, in the party and much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just awesome to every week you guys come into the premiere and you're just like, you're so generous. It's ridiculous. And we can't state enough how much we appreciate you guys. And to give the quick spiel, if you want to become a part of the adventuring party, feel free to drop a donation using the YouTube Super Chat feature during the premiere here on YouTube. Tell us your Pantheon race and class combo, of course, and we'll send you a group invite, so to speak. We've also got a Patreon if you can't make it to the premiere and want to support us elsewhere as well. But yeah, thanks again for all the support, guys. You're amazing. But all right, we've got no time to waste. Shall we get right into it, Theric?
Time's up. Let's do this. This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. Okay, so obviously it's going to be all about the dev stream here from March 10th today, as VR unveiled a lot of in-game footage with their new HDRP conversion now having been applied to what they showed us in the world of Terminus. There's a lot to talk about, like we said, and even more since we discussed on Pantheon Plus U that follows the dev stream immediately. So if you were there for that, like, don't worry, because we're going to talk about some stuff we didn't talk about there. Desert and I are going to break that stuff down. So if you watch the update stream as well, the dev stream, let us know what your thoughts were as well, because we want to hear from you. We want to know what you liked, what you didn't like, and share that in the comments or shoot us a message on Discord. But, in terms of where to start our discussion today, VR said at the beginning of the stream that it was basically intended to show, and this is the quote, what it feels like, what being in Pantheon feels like. And I think they did that really well through what I would say three key areas that they showed. to accomplish that goal, and that being biome design, weather systems, and the implementation of their day-night cycle. So let's take a look at each one of those one at a time. And Desmond, jump in here with any notes you have for each of those areas. So first, let's talk about the biome stuff. The VR said they have, and this is a quote, the biome generation system. And what that does is it populates area of the world with all the things one might expect to see in that type of an area. So like trees in a forest, if that's a forest biome. And the way they described it, is basically this tool creates the populates the area, like I said, but also creates transitions from one biome to another. So it wouldn't be like this abrupt change going from like a wooded area into a swamp, for example. And what that means, so what we saw a little bit of that. We didn't see the transition into a different biome, which I'll talk about in a second here. But, overall, what this means is that, a lot of places in Terminus are going to consist of things that aren't necessarily hand placed by the devs. They have mentioned this before in the Wild's End stream. They talked about this, how they still are going to do some custom design for, bespoke places. The Galdassi Ruins was the example in that stream. So, custom, designing of the environment for the players to navigate and challenges to overcome, that kind of thing. But of course, when you have a tool like this, it allows for quicker development, which we all want, at the cost of some finely designed areas. So I think at least in terms of environmental objects in any event, not talking about NPCs here, just talking about biomes and things that go in theirs, in those areas. So what are my thoughts here? I think the stream did a really decent job of showing off what the tool can do. It would have been cool, like I said, to see some more of those transition areas that they mentioned. Something else I noticed, and we talked about a few shows ago, was the grass movement when they were running through it. That was part of the thing that we really talked about. We're sort of going in the mindset of emergent gameplay and looking at how that might impact just what you're doing in the world. I thought the water looked great. I noticed the volumetric lighting right away. Some of the stuff that I noticed, the deeper areas, which were much more dark, and the less depth had the lighter coloration to it. There were some comments from the chat as well, talking about the mountains and how they seemed like there was they looked a little different. And I thought the water contrast, the water contrasted
the water
them really
made
well.
it really obvious, right?
Yeah, like it really pointed it out that they hadn't had that weathering effect applied, right?
Yeah, because like you see this like amazing looking water, like it looks very realistic. Honestly, I was surprised. I mean, beyond a little bit of like tiling, that we saw from a few angles. Like you're right, the volumetrics and all that. This was really good looking, and then you see these like these. It looks like it's somewhere between gray box and finished.
You reminded me of the remember the marshmallow trees from Gray Box from PA testing, right? Like
yes,
kind of had that effect.
Yeah, and I mean that was honestly one of my biggest criticisms, and I've been talking about that in like increasing how often I've been talking about that lately, and that was one of my big things when like I wasn't trying to get super hyped up, because the teaser screenshot, I was like, the rocks are still there. Either those aren't done, or the style is looking not what I was going for. But I don't know. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just when you watch the stream, look at the mountains, look at the rocks, and just take a gander at how kind of they just look very clean and and angular, and
right, and
the texturing's like flat, like I said, just somewhere between gray box and finish, and
right, and
it's funny because I went through the YouTube comments this time, since it's been up for a bit, and there's a lot of YouTube comments.
Has to be expected.
Yeah, and I mean what is really awesome is that a vast majority of them are positive. And the ones that are on the very other end of the spectrum are the usual culprits. But the main like regular criticism was the mountains and the rocks on them. And what's kind of cool is Chris Rowan replied to a few YouTube comments, and like you said, in chat as well, and they're really all over the place, kind of trying to answer stuff. And but in response to the like rocks being so kind of bright and clean, he did state that they're not complete. And I'm pretty sure he he also said in chat that the base biome textures are also placeholders, because I was noting that like
Right.
the grass and everything, it just kind of looked like a smudge, right?
Yeah,
Like
this was when you were on Pantheon Plus U, I think, and you were talking about it, and I think that your observation was so astute that he's like, yep, that's exactly, you are seeing what you think you're seeing, and this is why you're seeing that. So
yeah.
it was quite a nice clarification.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they're super active in all of this. And we'll talk about a situation later, I'm sure, that I feel like makes all of this very necessary. But yeah, I mean, that like kind of tackled my main criticisms, which was just great. And I mean, like Joppa also is in the comments as well and responding. So they're really trying to make sure that people are picking up what they're putting down, so to speak. And
Right.
and yeah, so I'm still a little bit more hyped than I would want to be.
More hyped than you'd want to be. I always want to be just a little bit hyped, not a lot hyped. I always want to be a little bit hyped at all times. But this was a stream that was, I remember in chat somebody said, something like graphical porn or something like that for the game. 'Cause it's like we've had all the technical details. Like this is just showing us the good stuff, right? So there was just a lot to get excited about, and when you see these things, it makes you realize that things are looking really good, and things are getting to a point where we can really start to imagine ourselves in this world, right?
Show not tell, right? I think that came up so many times in chat and et cetera. It's like people are realizing like, okay, so we're starting to get past the tell side of things,
Right?
and that's cool. It's cool.
It's super cool, yeah. So, I mean, everything you talked about there, the mountains, the water, the water always makes me laugh, right? Because they did say they need to get the swimming finished.
Yep, still need that swimming.
Yeah, no swimming in the water yet. It's just for looks. It's not for diving in or doing anything with yet. But, the question here is really like with regard to the biome generation tool, going back to that for a second, is, once if they're using this tool and then they still need to do like detail overlay, how much detail overlay needs to be done after they've used this tool? Then that's my question, and I don't know the answer to that, and I know you don't either. But do you have any thoughts on that? Any sort of ideas about that?
Oh man, you're asking me if I have thoughts or ideas. And,
well, I know you have thoughts and ideas all the time about everything.
But the cool thing is with all the tools, which I think I noticed they changed some verbiage. They're calling it biome generation tool or whatever. I think that's just kind of combining all of, because it's not just one tool. It's a lot of things. It's what you might call a pipeline. But
maybe you might call a high
I shouldn't have said that, because now
pipeline.
like that's gonna throw off people. But a workflow. How about that? It's a workflow.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's going to be using, Gaia, as was mentioned. I think they're using Gaina as well from Procedural Worlds as well, same company. They got their custom tools like the one Rob showed off in the first HDRP stream, and I think that just all kind of coalesces into biome generation, just to help people like simplify, But anyway, they allow for handcrafted detail after the procedural stuff is handled. So they're not getting locked into a set of rules. It's more just they're getting a springboard to jump off of, right?
Right.
So when it comes to real like detailing, I kind of think it's really just a factor of how much time and how many people they can get in there to build those little details out. And I've really the thing that's on my mind right now, and those looking for it might have seen this, is that there's no blending between objects and the terrain. Like there's no like color transition. It's just like things look placed.
Yeah, I saw
And
somebody point that out.
yeah.
I did see somebody point that out. Yeah.
And I mean, coming from Vanguard, take a drink. I'm so used to that because they're in such a rush to build out the world, and the tools weren't necessarily as easy to make these kind of like integrated looking props back then. But I'm so used to these things just kind of looking placed, but it still really kind of gets to me because if we come across some ruins and it looks like they placed a model on some terrain, it bothers me so much. And a thing like New World, to give it some credit, did really well was like, even though they were using like similar or the same assets for a lot of locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's noticeable.
Well, a lot of the cities were like just rotated 90 degrees.
Well, the cities totally.
Yeah.
But I mean like the ruins and stuff that are meant to like feel old, right? They still managed to capture that by really integrating the assets with the terrain. And I think that a lot of games nowadays are doing that really well. And I know that there's tooling out there to assist with that. And I hope VR comes across it because it's not a deal breaker for me, but it just looks artificial, right? And we want to be immersed. We want stuff to feel old. We want it to feel like it's been there for ages and it doesn't care if we're there or not.
Right.
But yeah, like that's the only other like big thing that I'm noticing that I have a little bit of concern about with that detailing that you're talking about is like, do they get people in there to do those kind of like fine adjustments and integrate props?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. What level, how much of that is going to happen and how close before we get to a release point does that kind of thing go on. So I think we'll continue to see that down the road, I would imagine. And I just to clarify, when they talk about this sort of procedural generation of biomes and stuff populating the biomes, it's not like the game is not procedurally generated. Like we're not going to be playing in a Minecraft world that's random every time, right? Like this is not the idea. This is more of a tool to create the world that they want in an efficient means that allows them to work smart instead of work hard.
The term that I would push and try to get ingrained in people's minds is procedurally assisted. It's basically like giving you something. It's like you don't start from a blank sheet anymore. Like that's really all it is.
Right. So that's that. Now let's talk about the day-night system because this was pretty cool. It's in the game, and I think they showed it off really well. I'm going to skip the talk on sort of how pretty it was because we did talk about that on the show afterwards. But it was amazing. I mean, there were some really nice shots. But instead, I want to focus on another area that didn't get so much attention, and that's how the day-night cycle affects the gameplay. VR specifically commented on this. They said, quote, guards are going to be walking around lighting braziers at night. NPCs will be returning for the night. So when I heard that, I have to say it takes me back to the old days. And this is something that I remember Richard Garriott of the Ultima universe, he used to talk about, he used to pine about this all the time, about these visions he had for the ultimate game to become a living, breathing world when you had these things and the populations would react to the day-night cycles. And so here VR say this is pretty interesting. Now they've talked about night and day being impactful before, but I think that when we saw this, it really put it into perspective, put it into context. And I would say I'm hopeful. I'm not counting on this to be a really overwhelmingly common thing in Pantheon, because I do think it's one of those things that's really, really hard to actually do. I think that I don't know if they have the horses for it. I think you'll probably see it a bit, just as a showcase or showing off some in certain areas. I don't know if it'll be all that common, but again, we'll wait and see. This is just me, sort of not, like you said, trying to keep my hype in check.
Yeah.
But they did say a few more things about the day-night cycle while we're talking about it here. And it's one of the things was the timing of it. It won't mimic real life. And this was something we talked specifically about on a previous episode, Desert. And I'm sure you remember you went pretty deep on that one.
Yeah. Like you'll note that even in the Q&A section at the end of the stream, like Joppa did say that they have everything hooked up for a full calendar system. Actually, I'll quote him. It says, set to track days, months, years, and the position of celestial bodies. And
that's amazing. I couldn't believe that when I heard that. Actually, I mean, I was okay. I was like astounded by tracks, days, month, and years, and then I heard positions of the celestial bodies. Like,
I mean, it makes sense. Like, these things should be important in a game like Pantheon, I think, and we'll get to the what celestial bodies may be later, but yeah, like he even said some things about seasons, which I'm always a little sketched about, because it's that thing that's always on the, like, oh, new MMOs coming out, they're gonna have seasons, and then it never happens, right? Like,
yeah.
But we'll have to see, because he just kind of like mentioned it, and he might just mean that, like, yeah, they could have like a 3-month thing called spring, but it doesn't mean it changes the entire world.
Right.
So we'll see.
Well, I mean, it's like, do the days get shorter in the winter seasons, like they do in real life?
Yeah.
Like, is that what's going to be happening here? I don't know, but I thought that was certainly pretty interesting. And when you saw the day and night cycles happening in the video demonstration, you really got a feel for how different things are going to be at night, right? There was another impact on the gameplay that they did mention. That was on gathering. They talked about, they used the example of maybe certain flowers only growing in the moonlight, right? And I know that the crafters and gatherers out there right now are just like salivating at this, because it adds so much, it adds such a gameplay experience to the whole thing, that you would need to look for something when there's, when it's dark. You can only find it when it's dark. So I think that that's really cool. Just the idea of it is really cool. So, and then the last thing, like you said, the seasons are another thing that I wanted to mention too. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anything else you want to comment on here, Des? Because I think that this is something that is pretty impactful.
Yeah, I mean, on the note of things being available in certain times, it inevitably came up that, just because NPCs, they talked about NPCs being tied in, and they change position depending on times. Like I think the note was that if they're in like a village, they'll go into their house at night, right. or certain NPCs. I think he even said, like, actually, let me see the quote here. It was like, Joppa just made a big deal about it tying in a lot to perception, having to find an NPC that might not always be in the same location. And so inevitably, some people really don't like that. Like, they really don't like the idea of, like, not having a static location to find something.
The funny thing is that, like, I can't think of an MMO off the top of my head that's done this and done it well. I can think of single player games. The Gothic games by Piranha did this. And I think Elex, which is sort of like a spiritual successor, more of a modern game, does this as well. Really, really cool stuff. And I always enjoyed it in single player RPGs, because I just feel like it makes the world more believable. But I mean, from a convenience standpoint, from a gameplay efficiency standpoint, people might not enjoy it quite so much. But I think it's right in line with how I think we've seen Joppa thinks about game design when it comes to building out this world. So you just, if you want to visit a certain vendor that's only open 9 to 5, you gotta plan accordingly. It's the same idea. It's the same concept as you want to travel to Black Rose Keep, but you're currently in, you're on a different continent and you only have 2 hours to play that night. Well, maybe you should plan that night to get a port over there in anticipation of wanting to be there the next day, right? When something's available, maybe you can't find a port the next day. Maybe it'll save you 20 minutes of time to get there, So
yeah, I keep falling back to the world's not games thing, and I've seen a lot of single player stuff as well. Like, we see, like, Skyrim, easy example, right? NPCs go in and they're unavailable. Like, we do see it in single player. I think maybe in MMOs, when we do see it, it's always like a one-off thing. It's always like here's my epic quest. And I was doing my epic quest, just cranking it out. And then, so this particular guy is just not here. He's literally just not here because he only spawns. But like, if VR is thinking about this, my hope is that they don't just make stuff not there, or at least for like quests and stuff like that. Like I could understand like certain creatures just not being around, but like NPCs, my guess is they'll just be elsewhere, right? Because they wouldn't want to just despawn the NPCs.
I think that's the idea here. I mean, EverQuest did the whole NPC spawning thing, right? Like that's easy to do. Giving NPCs real world routines and schedules is a much different thing. Like I said, Richard Garriott, Shroud of the Avatar. I remember when he was pitching that idea, and it wasn't even a Kickstarter thing yet. He was talking about it, and he was like so excited for this being the thing in an MMO, and it's like I get it. Like, and he's a visionary. He's definitely one of the old school visionaries of the MMO genre, right? So, I think we look back to his contemporaries. Brad was one of those contemporaries, and this is a dream that hasn't really been realized yet. So, it's pretty important.
I gotta drill in there that like if Pantheon is going to really immerse. I truly believe that they have to prioritize that world. And that means that you, as a player in the given moment, are at the whims of the world. And and I think that's just really important. Like and just to drill in, it's okay. It's okay that you can't do that thing right now. Like, let the world drive your gameplay for once, and not your checklist.
I love that. I love that, being at the whims of the world. I think that's just a beautiful phrase, and I'm gonna steal that and do something with it because it's awesome. And,
I didn't even know I said anything on it. Anyway,
Desrin, The Whims of the World, his new album. Speaking of being at the whims of the world, the weather. Now this is the third one, and I think this is probably the most talked about piece from the dev stream, and justifiably so, because it was you forget the emotional impact weather can have on you. And I say that from somebody who lives in a place with crazy weather. I guess, all those yeah, seriously. Anger is an emotion too. It's not just like glee and sadness. There's other emotions. Anger, this morning driving to work was very angry inducing. But, I think about like all those novels that start with, a dark and stormy night. There's a reason, that they were onto something, because when we saw this stream, they showed off the rain and the thunder and then the wind effects to pretty great effect. VR, what really was impressive is that they said that they can dial these effects into a pretty granular level, which is very interesting to me. So you might just get like a spring shower, you might get a torrential downpour. How violent can the storm be? How pervasive is mist in a certain area? The shots that we saw, I feel like the mist was sort of already pretty intense. So I would wonder if they could sort of dial that back a little bit. I'm thinking of places.
Oh no.
Well, I don't know if I wanted that misty all the time, like
not all the time, but like being able to like you said, turn it up to 11 in certain situations, in certain areas, Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was joking on the stream afterwards on Pantheon Plus U, and I said, this is what it looks like when your graphics card sucks, when the mist is turned up to 11, right? Because like they just can't render everything. So you just like, my graphics settings are terrible. So this is what it looks like. But if you could do that in a way that was like not, just obscuring things for the sake of frame rates and calculating triangles and all that stuff, it would be very cool. And that's what they said they can do. They could basically have complete control over manipulating the weather details to enhance the ambience, whatever mood a certain area calls for. One of the things I noticed, was the trees really swaying fiercely in the wind of the storm. And I joked on the show that it made my skin feel like it was wet just from the rain, just hearing those sights and sounds and feeling the sensations that would go along with it. One of the questions that came up, and Joppa commented on, and this is something that we, druids in Pantheon, they need some love.
Oh man.
You and your druids.
Oh man.
Need some love. So Joppa said druids in Pantheon will have some control over the weather. And we know that from looking at their spells. If you look on the website and look at the classes and the spell lists, they do have weather-related abilities and spells, which probably just added a few druids to the world by saying that. Because if you look at these storms and they're showing the weather effects, can you imagine like having this kind of power at your fingertips or something to this effect? Pretty exciting, but yeah,
on that note, though, because it's always been like the fantasy that the druid can like control the weather, and I think that's where people's minds go. And honestly, that comes up in like every MMO that's in development. It's like, it's control the weather, and then it like never happens. Well, Mortal Online, they did in Mortal Online, so
okay.
But I am actually thinking, I think this was the emphasis, is that the weather controls you in a lot of cases. So like they mentioned that some abilities are available during certain weather conditions, not that you're influencing them. So if we have a chance to redirect lightning, like Avatar style, I will be very happy though. But like that's how I think of it. Is like there's weather happening. Maybe we can use that in certain situations. And oh man, that's really cool.
You're right. That really gets the heart going. I think, one of the things that I'm worried about, not worried, because it would be cool anyway, no matter what, but just as a purely selfish reason, is having things become affected by rain in terms of the climbing, because climbing's such a big part of this game, planned to be such a big part of this game, that I have trauma from playing Breath of the Wild and never being able to climb things in the rain. It really drives me crazy. And it's one of those pieces of that game that I don't really think it serves a purpose, but they did talk about, the weather is going to, like you said, the weather's going to affect you in numerous different ways.
Yep.
So
it was said.
Yeah. So I don't know what that means though, in terms of other things, the first thing that popped in my head was just the climbing, but does the wind affect something in terms of your ability to carry a torch? Does it affect your ability to, now I don't think, again, this is one of those things that probably they want to do, but just is not within their their grasp, with the team that they have and the small and the resources that they're limited with. I don't think it is, because it seems like that's kind of would be a next level kind of advanced thing. But nonetheless, there definitely is, when you talk about the group dynamics and the group abilities, and then you take weather into account, I think that there's a real room for interesting gameplay stuff to go on there. But any other predictions on the weather aspects?
Well, they did say at some point that obviously these aren't all the weather effects right now. I think the fog was my favorite. I feel like that was the cleanest.
Really, my favorite was the lightning. When the sheet lightning that sort of lit up the whole sky, and then you could lit up things in the distance. I love that. That was my favorite.
So that was really cool. That was really cool. And in one of the clips, it even like followed that there was a lightning flash, and then a little bit later there was thunder. But then other clips, it didn't do that. But so I'm hoping they keep that like it's somehow tied to where the lightning strike is, that you see it, and then but
that would be crazy. I was just going to interrupt here, because that would be crazy. Like I don't know if you're like this, but when there's a lightning storm going on, I always count, right? You hear
me too.
You see the lightning, and then how long until you hear the thunder, right? Tells you how far away it is. I'm sure there's people out there like, you don't know what you're talking about, but this is how my folklore mythology of my brain works. So,
well, that was the thing. The speed of sound roughly matches up with 1 second.
Yeah, I just kind of felt like I was talking out of my ass there for a second, but you never know.
I'll validate you.
Okay, thank you for validating me. And so, can you imagine if that was the case, like in game, like that would be like nuts.
To be clear, not to say that this is trivial, but like they did say that they wanted to actually have like lightning hitting like a place, not just like a flash in the sky just everywhere.
Right.
So like that was said. So if that is the plan, like there's a number that can be made for how far is character away from lightning strike, and that can inform, hopefully, their sound engine to say when to play a sound. That's not too crazy, honestly. It really isn't.
It's one of those like simple things that would go so far, go a long way, right?
Little details. I think that's why it came across so strongly in the video, was like, you anytime you have that moment of like, oh my God, someone thought about that. I love that feeling in a game, you know?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like someone went through the extra little tiny bit of effort to make this perfect. Right. But the reason I was not going to choose the rain is because I'm saying this is in progress, but I see a lot of little improvements that could be made. And one of the things was, and there's a lot of ways they could accomplish this, but there's no like rain shader or increased like specular shininess, so to speak, like when it was raining. And that's just, to me, that's like such low hanging fruit, because I think that adds so much that stuff looks wet when it's raining. That like they've got to do that. They've got to do that.
Yeah.
And I hope that's coming later with all the refinements that are bound to happen. Just like don't skimp out on the wet shader. Don't do it, please.
It does seem
so
pretty
cool.
It seems pretty common in games these days. So yeah, no, I know what you mean, but yeah, lots of cool stuff. And I mean, overall, I think overall this dev stream was a real crowd pleaser. And honestly, being in following the community as closely as we do, I can tell you that, it feels like there was a little bit of restlessness that needed to be, sort of quelled or addressed, I guess. I think we can agree that I would say this was a win for VR. I think that that restlessness has probably been, subdued for now. And people, if they can move into a PA test in a reasonable time with this stuff, I think that's just going to be a home run, right? Like, because I think now you've set the bait. Now you let's get people testing this, and this is just going to be a world that people are going to want to jump into. So, but of course, patience as always, and that's what we're here for, to help with. So, the last point I'll make here is just, there was a final note. It was a really impromptu thing, but a great clarification from Joppa, just saying, because Ronak was like, this isn't final art, these aren't final art assets. And Joppa jumped in and said, actually they are, with the exception of the rain. He did point that out. He said a lot of these art assets are final, and I don't put an asterisk beside that because he didn't, but I want to, but I'm not going to, because I don't feel like that's what he said. But nonetheless, it is a great leap from where we were, right? So I'll just, I'll close off my comments on this part with that. But Desiree, is there anything else you wanted to add before we move on?
Oh man, that's the big thing I wanted to bring up. Actually, was that statement from Joppa, because I feel like it was odd. The odd part of the stream to me, amongst what I would say it was like a really good stream, and I've sat and thought about it, man. I've played through the clip several times. I've wrote out his exact words, and I'm not sure if that's the conclusion that I'd draw. I think what Joppa was meaning is that a lot of the assets that are not going to get replaced again, and not that they were all in their final version. Because like, in the stream there was literally several like gray box like buildings and models and animals and whatever. Like, hey,
that raccoon was the final raccoon, I'll have you know.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so it's like, that doesn't connect at all. Because he's not delusional, like, yeah, so true. Like it's obviously not finished. So I've got to only guess at what he said isn't meant to mean what we're seeing it as, and that basically, like, so the other devs in chat, like I said, CR was pretty active, and others as well, just kind of trying to inform about things like that. With like, when I'm talking about the terrain and CR is talking about like, oh yeah, that's going to get, that's temporary or whatever. I think that just kind of indicates that there's still a decent amount of work to be done. I think this is the big step forward. Like, there's no massive revisions now, but there's still plenty of work to be done. And I don't think this is the final. Like if I looked at this stream and I had to take it as meaning this is what the game looks like that this is, more like less release Pantheon, I would be honestly disappointed. Not because I think it looks terrible, but because I think it's so close to looking good, and I hope they don't stop here.
Right. I mean, keep in mind Fairthale, right? Like keep in mind Fairthale.
Yeah, Fairthale legit looks better
because it does look better. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, if that's just this with one more layer on top, right? So the assets are the same, but one more layer of refinement or beautification, I think is the word that they've used in the past.
Yeah.
So I like, that's the way I'm interpreting this, is that the assets are there, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what they're going with. But there's still more, like, there's more layering to go over those assets. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I kind of hope that he maybe like clarifies in like the newsletter or the next stream or something like that. Just because I know a lot of people noticed that comment, and it's funny because it was a comment meant to clarify. And usually, Jop is pretty good with words. So I don't want to say he means something that he didn't say, but I know a lot of people are attaching to that comment, and it might be worth clarifying. But
yeah, although I mean, when people hear something's final, that means the game's getting out sooner. So I don't know if people want that clarification necessarily.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I don't need to go down that road, No,
but I know. It's another time.
Yeah, I think if I had to summarize, I would say this is definitely one of their best streams, especially of late. It was just really well. It flowed really well. They showcased honestly a lot more than I would have expected in a single stream. Like they probably could have broken this up over 2 streams, right? And still been like pretty good. But yeah, there was just a consistent cadence of reveals. There was a lot of like little neat like moments. Like the double moons. I have to bring it up because, but yeah, the 2 moons, and that's just snuck in there. Little things like that, and so while I still have criticisms like of a few little things, but as far as the content they're showcasing, I gotta say the stream was quite good. A last little like spiel, because I know we're already lingering a bit, but. My thought that came to me after watching the stream was that VR is totally gameplay first. And VR, like especially like post refactor, has seemingly been like tools and function first. And so while some people might see this stuff as being a bit like late, part of it is just the opposite of how a lot of other projects work. The other projects, they'll show this pretty stuff with like nothing behind it, just final art assets like right out the gate, just to attract people in. Because as we see in the stream, a lot of people are super excited about Pantheon now because it's looking more done. But the irony is that it's probably more done than a lot of other games that were at a similar like visual stage. And I kind of feel like it's just a paradigm shift in that regard. Like they've laid this foundation to make sure that the game is good and that they can build with the tools that they're making. And so just, don't be fooled by that. There's still like kind of unfinished visuals and the lateness, but they just have different priorities than we're used to, I think. And though the visuals are, coming along a bit late, they're on the right track for looking freaking good.
Yep. Yeah,
they're on the right track. That's I think I'd summarize everything. They're on the right track.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I think this stream really did a lot of things well for them, and it is going to help them in terms of the development process, and keeping the community behind them, and everybody feeling like we're on track. So yeah, it was a good one. So that's it for the VR dev stream news. I want to quickly touch on some notes on what we're doing over here at Pantheon Plus. If you haven't been in our Discord, you are not following the MMO March Madness. It is quite fun. It is going strong. And we are in the Sweet 16, and I'm going to give you a couple quick highlights of what's gone on so far. First of all, EverQuest actually had to make a comeback to win the bracket over Vanguard. And Des, I'm sorry, I know I had to bring this up. I had to say it. And my heart was torn. I know where you cast your vote, but I had to cast my vote for EverQuest. But it did win, so it's now EverQuest is mauling its way through the competition after that Vanguard win. There was a pretty big upset, and I would say anyway, I would say it's an upset, but Lord of the Rings Online took out the current king of MMOs, according to you anyway, Final Fantasy 14, which I'm joking because I made you say that in our promo script. But I did predict... I did force you to say that was the king, and I predicted Lord of the Rings Online, as the one MMO to rule them all. But of course, that was just our script. And then today we've got Eve matched up against City of Heroes at the time of recording, anyway. And Eve actually has a slight lead, which is kind of surprising that it's not bigger. But the sci-fi bracket isn't my strong suit, so I don't really know what's going on there. But I got to tell you, coming up, we've got a Star Wars brawl happening, which is SWTOR versus Star Wars Galaxies coming up in the next few days. So if you're a Star Wars fan, and I think there's a few of them out there, you might want to get into our Discord and cast your vote for one of those two. But like I said, if you can't hear my voice, it's been tons of fun, and we've had lots of folks jumping in to take part. So you should definitely do the same. The link is in the description for you if you want to. And I've got then, if you're watching the video, you can see where the brackets are at on screen. You can pause it and whatever, take a closer look at it. In terms of Pantheon Plus, what we're scheduled for content this week, of course, midnight on Monday is Drac and his EverQuest crew taking on the denizens of Norath. Tuesday, we've got MMORPG 101. We're still playing Lost Ark. I don't know how many more sessions we're going to do, but we're cruising along. I've got another lore exploring video coming up on Wednesday morning where I'm playing Elden Ring. I'm doing some cool things with sort of cataloging the world and giving some lore as I play through that game, which I'm loving. Sparrow's on Twitch that evening playing Lotro with her friends. So catch her streaming live on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. The Crow Singer is going to have another chapter to her epic fan fiction tale, The Sway of Storms, coming up. That's chapter 20. It's going to be on the Pantheon.plus website. That's Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning. And of course, then the newsletter comes out from VR on Thursday. So that'll be exciting. Our friend Redbeard Flynn has a video coming out on Friday all about the HDRP stream that we just talked about. So you'll be able to hear his take on what he saw. And so busy week for us here at Pantheon Plus. Lots of content for you folks out there to enjoy. So I hope you do. And that's it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right, I'm going to steal from Kilson again this week. Pull the anti-rogue. Since I figured we'd be digging pretty deep in the HDRP Part 2 stream, right? And so this one's the community debate. It's going to be asking, what is your most feared boss mechanic in any boss fight to date, and why? Now, I'm going to try to be fair this week and pull some responses from both Twitter and the official forums. So I promise I'm not favoring the bird site, this time.
Well, we do like our birds around here. We have several.
We do like our birds.
Friends with birds around here, so.
But the tweet site is. I'm being fair, I promise. So the first answer I'm pulling from the forum. So to start this off, we've got Faded Emperor, starting and saying, quote, "I fear group-wide one-shot mechanics. I fear the resentment and toxicity that they can breed. I fear the lack of adaptability they can foster. And I fear the damage they do in pugs and the community as a whole." Okay, so coming out pretty heavy, right? Like, yeah. I really think it's interesting that one of the first responses, though, has to do with, the community response to combat mechanics, right?
That is interesting. Yeah, that is interesting because I hadn't really considered what mechanics cause grief, like in terms of a community, like which ones would be most damaging to a community. Is there a mechanic that, so Faded Emperor is saying that this is exactly what this does. So a group wide one shot, like a one shot mechanic. So wiping a party in one shot is what they're.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a pretty ubiquitous mechanic. Like that's in a lot of games. And that seems like the big baddie, right? Like it's the ultimate thing that you want to avoid. Isn't that a good thing? I don't know.
Well, yeah, and to me, I see this as being like frustration just breeds toxicity. Like, when people act out when they get frustrated, and so I don't know if there's going to be a way around that sentiment. I'm sure Fated Emperor has some like specific, thing. Sure.
I think somebody, I shouldn't say this, but I think somebody hurt Fated Emperor somewhere. But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Like, I've said this before. Trauma creates bonds. Like, when you go through something really can create bonds, yes, can also create problems. Agreed. But I'm a believer that when you go through something difficult, you come out stronger on the other side. And yes, if you're in a pug, that's a difficult thing. It's hard to recover from that because you're not like, I don't know if it depends on you, if you're intending on maintaining those relationships or even like adding them to a friend list or something like that. But if you're just there for a temporary thing, I guess it could be a really difficult thing to recover from. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if you're in a guild or in your group of your friends that you've, adventured with before, that kind of thing, it may cause stress and trauma, but you grow closer and you grow stronger because of it, right?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like I've seen it, Fated Emperor. I've seen it happen. I know, but I think it's worth the chance. It's worth the chance. And if people are going to be toxic because of wiping, I would hope that they'd either be improved by the people around them, or perhaps they are known as the toxic people on the server, and that has its own repercussions.
Minus said something a long time ago that always sort of stuck with me as a when he was playing WoW and they were raiding at high level, he would always look at it as, I don't want to blame anybody for doing anything wrong in the group. My job as a leader is to bring that person up, to make them stronger, to help them, realize what's the frustration here, like what's causing this to happen, and how can I empower you to feel better about the outcome, right? And that always stuck with me because I think it's just the best way to go about these kinds of things where, there may be a boss that has a terrible mechanic that one-shots the whole raid and can potentially wipe you and your group. But, instead of giving into the frustration of that happening, I channel that frustration to say to that person, like, look, here's what I'm doing. What are you doing? And what are you doing? Let's work together and get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. On Twitter, Basgrim responded saying, anything that requires the raid to split into several groups and accomplish different tasks simultaneously. I'm like smiling as I'm reading this. Is this good luck finding a pug that's coordinated enough to not ruin it for everyone? Oh man. That's the spice of it, isn't it?
He's absolutely right on that one, because that's a situation where you're only really able to accomplish that with coordinated teamwork, and that's hard, man. Like that's real hard to accomplish in a small window of time, or maybe on the fly. So when the mechanic splits your group or your raid into various parties around the arena or the space where you're fighting, somebody better know what they're doing. Somebody better be able to know what they're doing and to be able to communicate it effectively. Because if you don't have that person, which is not common, it's going to be real tough.
Yeah. Yep. We've also got Vandrad here on the forums responding with any mechanic that developers deliberately put in to make that NPC or event impossible to defeat because the content past that NPC or event is unfinished, and the developers don't want to admit that they shipped out a game or expansion that was knowingly unfinished.
Vandrad. Oh my gosh. He sees it like through the meta of gameplay and into like, it's, the developer purposely trying to like screw them, like this is done just to hide their lazy work ethic.
Yeah. So I wouldn't echo that part of it, but I mean, I have seen it before. I have seen artificial, like, for whatever reason, devs just like make this NPC like impossible. And like the first one I thought of was Nagafen and EQ2, like pre all of the level increases.
Okay.
Because you could attack him and he had mechanics, but they made it A, so you could only take 2 groups into his instance. He was like, 40 levels higher than Max, I think, as well.
Right.
Maybe 50. But my guild tried. We tried. And we had a little contest on how long we could last before getting wiped. I think we got to like 16 seconds. I can't remember which expansion it was, but like, but the truth was we never saw his bar move. And I don't know if that's just a matter of we didn't do enough damage, but it was always just kind of a missed opportunity, I feel. Because even if it didn't drop anything, I think of all of the, stories that people have, from oh my gosh, what's the mob in EQ everyone talks about from
the Vishen's Peak, right? Sleeper.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Sleepless, wrong game. Yeah, I'm blanking on it too. I've talked about it before. I know the story. I've talked about it. Just can't remember the name.
But yeah, I hate invincibility. Like on any naturally a natural creature you'd expect to be able to kill. Like I understand if you don't want specific NPCs to just get absolutely dunked on so that people can't basically griefing. But I mean, if it's a dragon, don't just block me from trying.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm glad that's few and far between. I'm glad that's not a common
it totally is. It totally is. But it was a kind of unique thing from the thread I wanted to
It's very Vandred.
Then we got Alicera on Twitter saying anything that requires me to do an individual task where if not performed correctly can seriously hurt or flat out wipe the raid, kind of like what we were talking about before. I hate bosses like that. I used to like raiding because it was a chill group effort. You can blend in and hang out. These days it's so stressful.
Sometimes that's good. I think that's the kind of thing that you ascend to that role. I like the idea of being somebody who's okay. I've done this boss before. I've done this mob before. At first, I just want to blend in, like Alicera says, part of the crowd. I need to learn. But then you ascend to the role of being the designate person, right? Okay, you are designated to go and light this torch. You are designated to go and stand on this block to keep this thing from spawning, right? I like that because I feel like it's a promotion in my, status, or a promotion within the group, the raid, whatever.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, I get the stress, right? I really do, and it feels so bad when you screw up. but
That's true.
I also just I love that they're there. I wouldn't not want them, because I'm sure there's always some folks that are going to be jerks about it, when someone in the raid fails. But I honestly, I have great memories of razzing other people in my guild where it's the whole "you had one job," kind of joke.
That's true.
And with just someone, they're they didn't do the thing, or they weren't listening, and it shows. I love when people get auto called out for when they weren't listening, and it's
that's part of the deal, though.
Stride. Yeah, it's part of it.
If you signed up for this, that's part of it, right?
Yeah. Totally.
No more easy. No more gimmies. We don't want gimmies anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest trend from this whole thing was a lot, and I mean a lot of people really fear Death Touch and Fear, the mechanic.
Yeah. This is
those
the go-to one.
Reigning champions of these threads.
Agreed. Yeah, I saw a lot of that too. I saw this thread, and I did see Death Touch mentioned a lot of times.
Oh, well, it was really fun, though. Really glad Kilson got this one going. It's a nice mix-up after last week, But really, if you guys have your own thoughts, there's a Twitter thread, there's a forum post. Go ahead and jump in there. Do your thing. Give your feedback. And just going to note, we're going to skip Community Spotlight this week, just in the interest of time, but we'll pick it up next week. I'm sure there's going to be plenty to throw in there next week. So we'll see you guys there. But that is going to be it for this week's community discussions.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. All right, now we know the tale of Terminus. It's time to focus in on a very small corner of the world with a rather large history. And the Galdassi giants and the ruins of Wild's End in which they lie were shown by VR not that long ago, so it's fresh in our minds. And now the lore to go with it is for our perusal. So let's hear what J.N. Gerhardt has to teach us about the world left behind by these giants in this week's Lore You Know. Rising up from the layers of Wild's End are the splinters of a long-forgotten power. The remnants of a tribe of giants, known as the Galdassi, are all that remains of a mighty and mysterious people. What ushered in their downfall, or hastened their abandonment of these lands, remains sealed within their strange inscriptions. Otherwise, the towering fragments they left behind are more like rotting timbers than tell-all tombstones. A world left behind. There is a legend that every wind in the skies of Terminus visits Wild's End at least once a year, each leaving a gift from their travels across the globe. For better or worse, this saying bears truth, as creatures and flora which ought not to have made a comfortable home in this lush wilderness. Yet far fewer ships than winds visit so heareth. With no formal harbor, merchants arrive more often by drunken stupor than proper course, the beach littered with the bones of shipwrecks, fleeing pirates, or worse. It seems the greatest resource in Wild's End is its capacity for the unknown. Its chief exports, if halflings cared for such pursuits, might be mystery and wonder. Yet these are frail elements, losing their value as soon as you put them in a box or bottle. The Wild's End of our day is dominated by gigantism. Immense insects, known as largia, fill the skies, their size a product of unchecked generations dwelling in the most verdant valley of Kingsreach. Leaves as wide as bucklers drift down from the great ulan trees, their sprawling limbs embracing clouds that roll in from the sea. The nameless mountains that shield half the land have waterfalls running over their shoulders, with crowns of frost forming in depths of winter. Yet each of these natural features loses some of their scale when compared to a race that no longer walks the shores of Wild's End. Many thousands of years ago, a nation-state of giants, known as the Galdassi, tamed this land and made it their capital. Evidence suggests that their domain may have stretched out onto the sea, though none survived to confirm or deny these clues. How long the Galdassi tarried and why they left remains one of the great mysteries of Wild's End. And that is the lore you know. So these weeks come and go so quickly, I have to say. And when you're making a weekly podcast about a game that's in development, I got to say that's a good thing because it's getting us closer and closer, right, Des? I mean, this week's stream, I think we're all a lot more eager to enter Terminus now. But Desrin, you and I, we have our jobs to do, right? We help keep people Pantheon patient, right?
Oh yeah. Well, or try or accidentally hype. Or accidentally kill the hype, or it just goes all over the place. But engagement, where we want people to be engaged with the community, and I hope that's what you guys get out of this.
Absolutely, yeah. No matter what it is, good, bad, or ugly, we're here to give it to you. So that brings us to the end of episode 93, and I want to thank everyone for helping keep us Pantheon patient by coming out and supporting the show each and every week. You guys are awesome. If you know someone who's looking for a new MMO home or just needs some Pantheon patience, why not share the rewind with them? Because that would be great. It helps us to grow, helps our community and the show reach a few more ears. So we look forward to seeing each and every one of you every week and next week as well to discuss the monthly newsletter. But until then, take care.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at Desrin Does also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.